ready.
Hi, this is Nate Schulte coming to you again with another episode of Discovering Battles with Nate. I know it's been a while since I've actually done an episode, and I hope you all are staying safe and healthy during these hard times, especially since here in Wisconsin, it's been in the negatives. But for this episode, we are going to be talking about the Battle of the Alamo. Now, this battle might have been a victory for the Mexican army during Santa Anna's time. However, this also was a bit of a rallying or an inspiration to the Texan defenders during the Texan Revolution. The battle took place on February 23rd to March 4th, 1836, near San Antonio, Texas. The Mexican army was under the command of Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, who was the president or dictator of Mexico at the time. He had one point more than 6,000 troops in his army, but only 4,000 were taken to the Battle of the Alamo. While in the Texans, who were under the command of Colonel William Barrett Travis and James Bowie, they were about 100 Texans in the Alamo, but there were more defenders that actually came in, but there was no more than 260 defenders in there. And Davy Crockett was at this battle, as many of you may know. He had already been a frontiersman, he was also a former congressman, and he was also a Native American fighter, but what happened was, from February 23rd to the 3rd of March, what happened was Santa Anna gave a truce offer to Bowie and Travis, but however, it was rejected, and it was for a surrender with no bloodshed. But Travis and Bowie did not want to follow this because they didn't trust him. And the thing to remember is the Alamo was 90 miles away from anybody to be able to reinforce it at a moment's notice. Because given the distance with going to the Alamo to anywhere that's 90 miles away, it's going to take quite some time to get any messages, and by the time the message does get to whoever the message is for, the battle may be over with, and the Alamo would be pretty much taken over. But that's the way it is. Something else to remember is that most of the defenders had muskets. Now with muskets, the bad thing there is that you fire your shot, then you gotta reload it, and that's gonna take quite some time. When you're in the middle of battle like that, you better have some cover, as has been said throughout history and through with tactics of musketry. As I said, that February 23rd, Santa Anna and his army arrived in Bahar, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and that's when the negotiations took place. But later on, 32 men came from Gonzales, Texas to help support the defense of the Alamo. This kind of lifted up the spirits of the defenders. However, 32 men was not enough. They were going to need more than that, much, much more. And it did. So, by March 3rd, 900 more Mexican soldiers actually arrived at where the Alamo was, or near the Alamo. But after the Mexican army bombarded the Alamo, trying to drive the defenders out, and the defenders were like, no, we're going to defend this at all cost. But around 4:30 a.m. on March 4th, 4 columns attacked certain areas of the Alamo. Column 1 attacked the north wall here, and the second one attacked the western part here. And the fourth attack the south end, while the 3rd was on the eastern. Now, the south end column here was to try to keep the south part busy. Before I go further, I'd like to notice or make some notes here that these are supposed to be cannons, but I didn't have the figurines. These cannons here were inside the Alamo's walls. And then there were cannons here, and here, and here over by where the chapel is, or the church is. Now, just so you all know, before I go any further, I would like to mention that Davy Crockett's position was right here to defend the picket fence by there, which I will talk about a little bit more later. But back to the engagement. As I stated, the columns were supposed to attack the western wall, the north wall, the eastern face, and the south end right here. The south end was to be distracted, but since the major battle was going on over in the north part, Santa Anna had an idea. He considered himself to be like a Napoleon. Now, 4:30 a.m., it was still dark out. With the good advantage of the dark, if you're the attacker, you have the dark to cover you and hide your numbers, and hopefully you'd be able to sneak in, and it'd be more difficult for your enemy to see. The Texan defenders had sharpshooters. Now, they didn't have night vision goggles or telescopic scopes back then, because back then they hadn't been invented yet. The disadvantage there is that they would have had no way to be able to defend the Alamo any better while they were getting in position, while the Mexican army was getting in position. All right? But what happened was columns 1, 2, and 3 actually formed over here, and they used ladders to actually climb up there, because some of the 1,400 men bought ladders, and they were going to use it to try to get inside the walls. And when that happened, as these two figurines here, they actually advanced right out into the Alamo. But over here, Travis tried to rally his men, but he was soon killed. And on him was a letter written by Robert Williamson on March 1st. And the letter stated that 300 reinforcements were on the way and hold on until they arrived. This was one of the reasons why he wanted to hold on, because he wanted to hold out and hopefully hang on until help arrived. But as I stated recently, 90 miles away, the battle would have been over. So within the first 20 minutes of the battle, when the ladder and the hopping over the walls took place, those first 20 minutes, they were in the compounds. The Texans retreated into the long barracks, and this is where hand-to-hand combat was going on. And more of that type of fighting took place in the low barracks, which is right here. Now, Jim Bowie had been sick, and so he was not in very good health to be able to fight. But it is said that he did try to fight until the death. But when that happened, he did fight to the death. As I stated earlier about Mr. Davy Crockett, over by the church here, him and his Tennesseans, as they were called, had to guard the picket fence here, which was the most vulnerable part of the Alamo. Now, the reason there is that, as you may have seen from Gettysburg episode that I did, or if you ever seen, picket fences over in, any national park battlefields, or even in the Civil War films, those are easier to get over. You don't really need a ladder. You just climb over there or jump over them. But Davy Crockett was there because he was assigned there to guard that at all costs. The battle took place for about 90 minutes, and it was over before dawn even came. Now, the casualties for this battle were 600 Mexican soldiers lost their lives. About 189 defenders died. But the thing to remember is Santa Anna was kind enough to spare the lives of all the women and the children of the defenders. He didn't want to be so barbaric, he was afraid that if he was to kill the women and children, then that was going to encourage a bigger fight, and he didn't want that. He just wanted to have the Texans out of there so that way they could claim Texas. However, the barbaric thing is that the defenders, any of that were wounded or surrendered, no quarter was given to them. That's when the battle was over. However, the battle did inspire the Texans to fight harder, and also to, we better fight to not just to avenge these men, but also to protect ourselves. But on April 25th, Santa Anna was captured at San Jacinto, and he surrendered. That was the end of the Texan Revolution. My sources for this episode are The Alamo, an Illustrated History by George Nelson, The 100 Battles, Decisive Conflicts That Have Shaped the World by Martin J. Doherty, and in this volume, The Alamo, the episode The Real West, The Battle of the Alamo, that was directed by Craig Hafner. Thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Discovering Battles with Nate. Please subscribe and click subscribe, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.